Key moments from this week's workshop were when we learned about phonemic and phonological awareness and how the activity of segmenting words into sounds through hearing the words reflects one of the skills and knowledge that students need to acquire in order to achieve phonemic and therefore phonological awareness. According to Seeley-Flint, phonemic awareness is a subset of phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is the understanding that oral language can be expressed as individual sentences, words, and sounds within words. It includes word awareness, syllable awareness, rhyme awareness, alliteration awareness, onset rhyme awareness, and phonemic awareness, which in turn includes segmenting first and last sounds, blending, segmenting words, and manipulating sounds. In the bigger picture, each of these individual components contributes to a strong sound-based system that supports future development of not only talk, but of reading and writing, according to Seeley-Flint. In line with this is the concept of oracy according to Seeley-Flint. Oracy is defined as the ways children apply their knowledge, skills, and understanding about oral language for a range of purposes and within a range of social and cultural contexts. In classroom learning contexts, students' engagement with oral language is along a mode continuum. That is, students move from a more spoken-like to a more written-like language. At each position on the mode continuum, the development of oral language not only informs the practices of talking and listening, but also moves the learner towards reading and writing. Applying my above learning to Red Creek School in the R2 classroom, I would use the Haggerty book with the whole class for 5 to 10 minutes. Next, the students split into their guided reading groups. The lowest group, or green group, is made up of the 2 reception students who are not yet reading. The intermediate readers are the 5 reception 4 year 1 and 3 year 2 students. Since these are a total of 12, they are divided into 3 groups of 4. Each group is blue working on the same activity. The highest group is made up of the fluent readers, red group, 2 receptions 2 year 1s and 4 year 2s, which are also divided into 2 groups of 4 students each. The activity for the lowest group will be to match cards together, picture, letter name, and letter sound, as shown in the photo here. For the intermediate group, the activity will be matching letter sound cards with CVC word cards, consonant, vowel, consonant, as shown. The fluent readers are divided into 2 groups for guided reading. While I work with the first group, the second will do quiet reading. Then the 2 groups swap. One works with me, while those that have finished do quiet reading. A discussion in the workshop about the 4 components of writing: context, text form, processes and strategies of writing, and writing conventions was a significant moment for me in learning about teaching writing. I had not thought of teaching writing in the way that fellows in Oakley explained, that there are fundamental understandings that need to be established in order that children are able to produce texts in a way that considers purpose, audience, and subject. These are an understanding of writing as a social activity that involves communicating information to others, an understanding that people write for many different purposes, therefore information in a text must serve a particular communicative purpose. An understanding that there are different types of texts and that each type is structured differently in a way that best serves the purpose for which it was written. An understanding that people write for a particular person or group of people, sometimes for oneself, therefore someone will have to read the text and comprehend it. Another significant moment for me from the workshop was the analysis of gorilla as a teacher. Although we identified this student as being in a transitional stage, I learned that some children could have traits from more than one stage of writing development. These 2 instances of learning from the workshop are reflective of the Fellows in Oakley and Seeley-Flint readings, which state that learning to write is a gradual process and that children need to be provided with effective learning experiences across an appropriate range of skills, knowledge, and strategies to improve as writers. In line with the above, at Red Creek School, I would ask the junior primary students to write a procedural recount after taking them to the gym for a sports activity, using the recount wall as a support. For the middle primary students, they can write a procedural recount after we cook something at the school. Students normally learn to cook at RCS, which is part of the design and technology curriculum under food production. Local produce from the farms can be used or from the garden at the school. Another example of a procedural recount could be on the cycle of growing, taking produce to the market, and buying. This links to the agricultural part of their life as opposed to people who live in the city who buy straight from the supermarket. These are different stages of writing according to ACARA, which are personal versus procedural recount, according to year level, but not necessarily according to student abilities. According to Derienke and Jones, as a teacher applies the teaching-learning cycle in the classroom, responsibility of teaching is gradually being released from him or herself. This occurs through moving from explicit or modeled teaching to working together with students in the form of shared reading or writing tasks, to allowing students opportunities to work together in the form of group tasks, to students reaching independent reading or writing. It is important to note that this I do, we do, you do together, and you do alone model of teaching and learning is not a linear one. It does not necessarily have to be in that order. Teachers are always improvising learning according to the needs and capabilities of students. According to Derienke and Jones, in the building knowledge of the field stage, which occurs throughout all stages of the cycle, talking to learn is taking place. The theoretical underpinnings of this cycle are based in Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, which represents the difference between what a student can do without help and what he/she can do with guidance from a more significant other. This is in line with Edward Grove's classroom pedagogy, in which talk practices need to be aligned with academic purposes and instructional goals. Talk practices promote student learning directly through accessing ideas and relationships between ideas, or indirectly through designing a social environment that supports a culture of learning, talking, and listening. From these theoretical underpinnings and from the Talk Moves article, I was able to come up with a dialogue that I would use with my students using Where the Wild Things Are text in a shared reading session, which you can see in the background. In my responding to Where the Wild Things Are, I related to mischief I went through as a child with my parents, personal repertoire. I was also thinking how I would scaffold student learning to support their comprehension. In this sense, I was responding through my academic culture repertoire. Finally, I immediately thought of the movie Jumanji as soon as I read the story. Therefore, in this sense, I was accessing my literary repertoire. I realized that as a teacher, I must intentionally choose texts that are at age-appropriate levels for students in my class, thus adding to my academic culture repertoire. I would adapt this task to the junior primary students in Red Creek School by having a guided reading session with the junior primary R2 class using a book about an Aboriginal celebration, since there is an Aboriginal child in the classroom. In this way, connections are made with the text through accessing prior knowledge of students. In addition, the topic fits into an inquiry-based model of teaching students different celebrations around the world, which is also linked to ACARA through intercultural understanding. A good strategy to pre-teach vocabulary is to have students repeat the word to be learned a few times, explain the meaning using age-appropriate language and ideas, and give examples of the meaning of the word, as well as examples of what the word is not. According to Seeley Flint, effective writing occurs through the gradual release of responsibility model, which includes a range of teaching practices such as modeled, shared, interactive, and independent writing, and varying levels of support are provided at different points of need. During the modeling phase, according to Seeley-Flint, explicit instruction should be incorporated into the process of writing, into structural and grammatical features of genres, and into spelling. After this phase, responsibility shifts from the teacher, and her role becomes more of a supporter, scaffolder, and encourager until students reach the independent writing phase, in which they apply knowledge about writing into creating their own texts. In the case of narratives, teachers should explicitly teach the structural and grammatical features through modeling these after exposing students to narrative texts, then teach these through a shared writing task, and finally they can have students do an independent writing task, such as identifying features of a narrative, or a more challenging task to apply the features in writing their own narrative. Traditional grammar, according to Derianka and Jones, classified words into categories such as doing and describing. However, words were looked at in isolation in traditional grammar. Functional grammar, on the other hand, focuses on the function of words, not only their form. The whole purpose of functional grammar is using language in context. In narrative texts, according to Derianka and Jones, the language used represents three different functions: the ideational function, the interpersonal function, and the textual function. For the activity done in class, in which we were given sentences to identify the participants, circumstances, and processes, I would adapt these for the combined Year 3-4 class at Red Creek School by having the same activity to do. However, for the Year 3s, the sentences would include only simple clauses in them. The Year 4 sentences would be complex ones. This is in line with the HALA content descriptors of AC9 E3 LA06 and AC9 E4 LA06 for Years 3 and 4 respectively, as an independent task after a task of the same activity, leading to independent writing of their own creation of these types of sentences included in them. According to Derianka and Jones, the different types of information texts or reports that students need to learn how to write include descriptive, classifying, compositional, comparative, and historical reports. Each of these types has its own social purpose that students learn, its own sample curriculum context through which it is taught, a general structure that students need to adhere to in their writing of these texts, and common language features that students need to learn to produce these in their informative texts. According to Seeley-Flint, specific meta-language associated with a genre needs to be explicitly taught by a teacher when using a genre approach to teaching writing. To explain using our workshop example, our sample curriculum context was the southern right whale. Our type of information text used was descriptive report. The social purpose for the writing is to give information about a species by describing physical attributes, behaviors, habitat, etc. The structure of a descriptive report typically consists of a general statement and a description. The noun group is a common language feature presented in all text types, but it is particularly important in descriptive texts. Other language features include relating verbs, action verbs, simple present tense, general and technical nouns, adjectives, phrases, and clauses, and declarative statements. According to Derianka and Jones, in the early years of school, young children encounter simple descriptions of people, places, and things. Texts at this stage might include simple sentences. Their descriptions might be in the form of labeled diagrams. In their primary years, they learn to develop a basic spoken description of objects through games such as What's in the Bag and other hands-on activities. The teacher points out brief written descriptions about familiar animals and places in texts read in class. The teacher and students jointly write and read back simple descriptive reports. Gradually, these descriptions become highly detailed and are represented in a multimodal fashion across print, visual, and graphic representations. Applying the above to the combined reception Year 1 and 2 class at Red Creek School, I would brainstorm prior knowledge of students on whales, Then I would read the picture book, As Big as a Whale, to the whole class. After discussion of the book and taking students on the camp trip during whale season, I distribute the following sheets to each year level as part of their writing tasks on whales. Each task will be explained as a whole group, sending off each group to their tables after explicit instructions of what to do in each sheet. Prior teaching would have been done on nouns, verbs, simple sentences, compound sentences, through modeled writing, guided writing, according to year levels and abilities. This learning is in line with the HALA content descriptors. AC9 EF LA07, AC9 E1 LA07, AC9 E2 LA07, AC9 EF LA08, AC9 E1 LA08, AC9 E2 LA08.